Well, good afternoon. Good to see you today. A lot of people I haven't seen here before, so nice to meet those of you that I haven't yet, and just so happy to be back here and spend this day with you. And what a beautiful day it is to come together to worship God. I just want to thank the worship team just for leading us and drawing us near to the Lord through song and worship and just meaningful prayer and introduction. That we come here on a day that is so intimate, I think, just because from the very beginning of God talking about these feast days and talking about his feast of unleavened bread, he said, these are my feasts, and I want to share this with you. And every part of what we do when we remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy, when we remember God's feasts and keep it holy, we're making a connection to the creator of the universe who told us about these things. And you realize the whole reason we celebrate is based on a declaration that came from his word to us, and we believe it, and now we act upon it. And when you really think about what life is and coming to know God and who God is and the reasons that we're here, it all really comes down to that. Will we believe the things that God has said, and will we take action on the things that he has said? Will we apply it to our lives? And so it's just a wonderful day to be here, and I have an announcement to make, and that is that we have two people that are taking steps today to do that. Kevin and Joshua are going to be baptized here today. Yes. So we're super excited about that. We're going to do that after the potluck. So we'll still have time for fellowship after the worship service. We'll get some food to eat, and then we'll do that. Unless there's a timing issue back there. There's a timing issue. So we're going to probably do the baptism right after the service, and we'll get to that first, and then we'll eat some food, all right? And if you can't wait, sneak in there, get what you need, and then meet at the baptismal. So wonderful that we have a baptismal to use here, and just to be able to all partake and witness the commitment that they're making to Jesus Christ today. But it's a wonderful day, a wonderful celebration, so super excited about it, Kevin and Joshua, and it's just really awesome. So I'd like you to turn with me to the book of 1 Corinthians chapter 5. Willa started us off here today in her memory verse, and beautiful verses in regard to the understanding of this feast. But what I'd like to do is start here today in 1 Corinthians chapter 5. Everything that we can read about in the Old Testament actually finds its purpose in what God is showing us into the new covenant. You remember when Jesus met the woman at the well, the Samaritan woman, and she said, we worship on this mountain, you worship in Jerusalem. And Jesus said, there's a time coming. It's not on this mountain or in Jerusalem, but God is seeking such to worship him in spirit and in truth. And this feast is really about an understanding of what that is, to worship God in spirit and in truth, to come before him and to really have that relationship with him. Again, what is God interested in? Why did he make us and give us life? He made us and gave us life so that we would have fellowship with him, that we could share eternity with him. And eternity is not just being conscious forever. It is sharing a knowledge of God, as it says in John 17, that we would know the Father, that we would know Jesus, that we would know what it is to have a relationship together. And so he says here in 1 Corinthians chapter 5, and the story here is that there's one that's openly having reported sexual immorality among you, verse 1. And such sexual immorality is not even named among the Gentiles, and a man has his father's wife. And you are puffed up and have not mourned that he who has done this evil deed might be taken away from you. Now, here's a context for some instruction about the Feast of Unleavened Bread. But what he's basically saying is the whole point of us coming together as a body is that we believe in God, we repented, and we came to be joined together. And to have one among your midst who is openly committing sexual immorality is, in a sense, a hypocrisy for the whole church. You say you're believers in Christ. You say we should repent and believe. Would you leave one openly in pride among you doing this? And the answer is no. The whole point of coming to Christ is to walk away from sin, that sin would no longer have dominion in your life, that you would give yourself to the things of mercy and God's grace and God's goodness and his love and his truth. And so he says to them down in verse 6, he says, your glorying is not good. Do you not know that a little leaven leavens the whole lump? Therefore, purge out the old leaven, that you may be a new lump, since you truly are unleavened. For indeed, Christ our Passover was sacrificed for us. Therefore, let us keep the feast, not with the old leaven, nor with the leaven of malice and wickedness, but with the unleavened bread of sincerity and truth. When we think about this feast, just want us to think about it in the context here of what was happening in this church, of the Apostle Paul saying that a little leaven leavens the whole lump, that basically you can't let this abide. But he's also saying that in keeping the feast, we do it not with the leaven of malice and wickedness, but with the unleaven of sincerity and truth. I just want us to think about these words just for a moment in the sense of the greater context. Malice and wickedness, we often use malice as something that where somebody has the intention. They want to do something wrong, something hurtful, something harmful, right? And wickedness, the way that it's done, the actions of evil, things that are being done that are against God. And sometimes we can look at these as behaviors, but what I want to ask you to do today is think of it about what he's saying in terms of how a little leaven can leaven the whole lump, and what the heart is that is in each one of us, not just in behaviors, not just in the things that we say or do, but actually in what's going on inside of our heart. Because sincerity and truth is the taking of whatever it is you're looking at and holding it up to a light test to see if the vessel is pure or not. That word sincerity, it basically means it can stand a test of light. And putting it to a light test is saying, what's really going on inside? And sometimes we can think of Christianity, we can think of religion, we can think of it as practices, and we can miss the reality of the relationship and the new creation that is going on inside our hearts by Jesus Christ to transform us from who we were and maybe who we are today into who God actually wants us to be. And in order for this to take place, there has to be a willingness to have a transparency of heart, a visibility to God to say, who am I? What am I? Why am I? And what happens in life is we can so often grab onto identity that is not of God, and we can pursue identity that is not from God. And it can take us on all these different courses where our motives are impure, where we're not doing things for the right reasons, where selfishness is coming out, where a survivalism, actually, of trying to get what we want can overtake love for other people. And I think we've all experienced that in our lives. If we've lived long enough, I have done things in my life that was based on a motivation for myself, and I wasn't thinking how that would come across. I wasn't thinking how that might hurt somebody else. I wasn't thinking it all the way through. And the brilliancy of God and the purity of God's heart is he's always thinking it through. See, the way of God is so pure because it can be done by each person forever and ever without harming anyone. That's why you can make an offer of a kingdom with peace without end. Why you can say there's going to be no more death, no more sorrow, no more pain, because the ways of God are so pure and so right. And the ways of his children become so pure and so right that it produces this peace ongoing. It's a wonderful promise. And so he says here, with sincerity and truth. Now the truth it's the word aletheia in the Greek, and that word basically means the manifestation of the truth. But we might think of it in another term, and that is, what's real? Is it true? You know, you go to a restaurant where they have a magician, and the magician's doing tricks, and it might be such a good trick. You're like, how'd you do that? Right? Have you guys ever seen like a magician and you're like, I can't believe that. I remember my wife and I and some friends, we went to see this magic show, and we got some free tickets to go in. Really cool place in Southern California. And the magician's like floating a card. And I'm like 2 feet away, and this card is floating, and I'm looking, and I'm trying to, how in the world, you know? And so you go home, and you're like, I don't know what was up with that, but that was really bizarre. But the whole truth wasn't revealed. I just couldn't see the truth. What was happening, well, I won't tell you the trick because, well, do you want to know the trick, how it works? It's the most amazing thing. There's a string attached from the hand that goes around and wraps over the shoulder and comes down, and basically, in a sense, like a pulley, and then using that string, the hand has it the whole time. So when it's beautifully rising, there's a string the whole time. It's so thin, you can't see it. It's just, but there's no secret to that. But what they want you to believe is that it's real magic. It's something happening, you don't know why. And that's kind of what makes it fun. What makes it fun for us is they've done a trick in a way that we can't figure it out. You're looking at it, you're like, I can't even believe that this is happening. And what was so amazing was, because of the way the string attaches with just a little bit of stickiness, he can hand you the card, and he can say, hey, do you have a key card? Yeah, give me the key card. Takes the key card, he slaps that little string on there, and he's floating your key card. You're like, no way. How'd he do that? Right? It's like all this stuff because there's some ingenuity there, but his whole purpose, actually, to make the trick fun for us, is to not let us know how he does it. Now, unfortunately, in life, we can sometimes build our lives like a magician, where we're trying to make something a reality in somebody else's eyes that's just not true. And that is one of the things that Jesus talked about this leaven. Turn with me over to the book of Luke, chapter 12. Luke chapter 12, we're going to look here at verse 1. So that word truth there, again, is it's seeing of a reality. It really is what is candid, where there's no pretense in life, where you're not pretending to be something that you're not. You're being genuine, you're being true. You're not trying to trick or deceive or make somebody think something different. But notice what Jesus says here in Luke chapter 12, verse 1. He says, in the meantime, when an innumerable multitude of people had gathered together so that they trampled one another, he began to say to his disciples, first of all, beware of the leaven of the Pharisees, which is hypocrisy. There is nothing covered that will not be revealed, nor hidden that will not be known. Therefore, whatever you have spoken in the dark will be heard in the light. Whatever you have spoken in the ear, the inner rooms, will be proclaimed on the housetops. Now, who's thrilled about that? Everything that's said in your house will be made known, shouted out, revealed, proclaimed. You know, Eric, and thank you, Eric, for the offertory today and that message. But when you realize that you're here on borrowed time, and really what your life is simply a gift, and that God sees everything you and I do, it does change your perspective quite a bit. See, ultimately, elementary faith says that you believe there's a God, and that God created all things, and specifically God created you, and he created you on purpose. Now, what does God see of you? What does God want of you? And every part about stripping away malice and wickedness in our hearts is really about saying, I want to come to a place where God can look and abide in my heart, and he's comfortable there. Remember what Jesus said? He said, if you obey my word, my Father and I will come to you, and we will abide in you. So the question we have to ask ourselves is, today, as I am here celebrating this feast before God, as I'm thinking about my relationship with God, is my heart in a place where God is comfortable? Are there games going on in my heart that make God uncomfortable, where he's saying, well, you dress for show, you look religious, but what's going on inside is not that? And see, one of the things that happens when we join groups and we join a church and we can start going through motions is we can learn ways of doing things. There's nothing wrong with learning ways of doing things, especially if the ways of doing things are good. But the question is what's really going on inside the heart. Because if there's one thing we can see from the course of humanity is you can change large groups of people very quickly. Right? All we had to do is look back in 2020. How fast did society change behaviors and just go with something completely different that had not been done in our lifetimes before? And it happened so quickly. Behaviors can change, and we can learn to conform. I said, I got here to Texas because we don't have a lot of freedom yet in California. Going into a restaurant without a mask, sitting down last night for dinner without a mask, having a server come over without a mask, drinks served by people without masks, food being made with people without masks, I almost felt guilty. I'm like, what's up with this? This is wrong. I feel like something's not right here because I've been conditioned. I've been institutionalized a little bit into thinking a certain way, practicing certain things, because if you want to do that in California, I mean, they just got excited in California. My wife and I showed up at a restaurant on our Sunday fun day, and they let us sit inside. You can actually come in our restaurant now. We won't make you eat on the street. It's like, wow, hospitality is back, right? But you go in, and it's like, well, there's like 6 tables out of 40 that are available to sit at. It's still kind of weird. It's like we're going to keep you away from everybody else. But these ways of thinking, we learn and adjust to quickly. In churches, in community groups, in school groups, in government organizations, in our jobs, our workplaces, we can learn behaviors and we can go along with them. But it doesn't necessarily mean that there's been a change of heart. I've never been a believer in wearing masks, and if you have, that's great. That's not a statement of judgment. I'm sharing something with you from my heart. I didn't feel convicted about it, but I did it. To be considerate of the business owners, to be considerate of things that were going on. Now, that could be right or wrong, depending on who you are, but I did it. So the reality is that I've changed my behavior to do it, but I can tell you that though you might have seen me wearing a mask, you didn't see it on my heart, because my heart said, I'm doing this for them, not because I want to do this. And the truth of what God is bringing out in the Feast of Unleavened Bread is you can be looking a certain way, but that doesn't mean that's what's really going on inside. And what we have to do is be willing to stand up before the Lord and say, I don't want that anymore. I don't want to have an outside behavior that's not reflective of what's inside. I don't want to be thinking different inside. But here's the problem. You and I, in this carnal flesh, where we are, we all have a law of sin that dwells within us. It will bring us down every time. It is the default way. If we do not fight against what we are carnally, we will be carnal people, and that's the way it is. Galatians chapter 5 says that the flesh lusts against the spirit lusts against the flesh. The desires are different. But he says if you walk in the Spirit, you won't fulfill the lusts of the flesh. But that is the only way to do it. Flesh can't overcome flesh. Only God's Spirit can do that. But how do we get to the place where what's in us is pure? Now, when Jesus was on the earth, he was making this point. Again, he says in verse 1 here, beware of the leaven of the Pharisees, which is hypocrisy. There is nothing covered that will not be revealed, nor hidden that will not be known. See, what Jesus kept knowing is like, remember they said, hey, Jesus, should we pay taxes? And it says that Jesus knew that the question was not based on really wanting to know. The question was based on a heart of hypocrisy. Because what they were really trying to do is trick him and get him in trouble with the Roman government. And so it's pointed out, Jesus understood what was in the heart. So even though they're acting like, I'm a student here, they weren't trying to be students. They were trying to trick Jesus. They were trying to challenge Jesus. They wanted an answer from Jesus that would get him in trouble. Their heart wasn't real. Turn over with me to Matthew 23, probably one of the most famous chapters that goes through this. But I just want us to notice a few things here in Matthew chapter 23. In Matthew 23, in regard to this hypocrisy, Jesus acknowledged that the scribes and the Pharisees, they sit in Moses' seat. They're the ones that are bringing forth the law, teaching, and leading. But he says, verse 3, therefore, whatever they tell you to observe, that observe and do. But do not do according to their works, for they say and do not do. So if you're making a list of hypocrisies that we're talking about, you can add this one to it. They say and they do not do. I can tell you that when I started teaching the Bible 30 years ago, there were lots of things that I would say to do that I myself could also say I wasn't doing. How does our heart hold up to the light of Jesus Christ? And what do we see when we measure ourselves against the purity that's in Him? What's really going on inside of us? See, everything else about coming to church or walking a certain way, if it's really not from our heart, it hasn't really begun to happen. Because Jesus came to be concerned about what was going on in the heart and mind. Remember what he even said? He said, when he began his ministry, he stood up and he read from the book of Isaiah. He said, the Spirit of the Lord is upon me. He has anointed me to preach good tidings to the poor, to heal the brokenhearted, to set the captive free, to relieve those who are oppressed, that they might be at liberty. What was the liberty? What was the bondage? What was the brokenness that Jesus was talking about? Because it seems to me like Jesus came to minister to everybody. And ultimately, what has happened in life is the effects of sin have ravaged our hearts, our minds, and our spirits, where now what we're doing is we're seeking identity in all kinds of ways. And it started from the very beginning. What did God say? He said, let us make man in our image and in our likeness. Let's give them dominion. What do people try to find today? They want to be like God and they want to have dominion, right? They want to be fruitful and multiply. They want to be blessed. This was God's plan for mankind from the beginning. But what man did was reject the way of life that God offered in the tree of life and in the garden and in what God set up. And man chose a way that God said, don't choose that way. Because if you choose the knowledge of good and evil and eating of that tree, you will surely die. In trying to grab for yourself. And what did Satan appeal with? He said, you're not going to die. The Lord knows that in the day you eat of it, your eyes will be open. You'll be like Him. You'll be like God. You don't become like God by acting in a way against God. It seems simple, but it's tough to master. You don't become like God by acting in ways against God. You're never going by selfishness to become selfless. You're never going to, by being driven by your own lust for pleasure, come to a place of love. Because eventually that's where all warfare comes from. Eventually that's where all the problems of the world come from, because we're driven by things of malice and wickedness in our carnal heart. And if we're trying to grab something for ourselves, what we'll end up finding is just the opposite of what God is. In fact, what God has shown is that it's not by grabbing, it's by giving. So what's the motivation that's in our heart? That is the essential question here. So he says the Pharisees, they say, but they do not do. Verse 4, they bind heavy burdens hard to bear, lay them on men's shoulders, and they themselves will not move them. You need to do this, right? You need to be this way. We hear this all the time. You should do this. Okay? But the question is, if you're going to make a statement like that, am I doing that? I said that when I was young, I used to do this. When I started to come closer to God, I realized how much hypocrisy was in myself and in my teaching, because I was saying many things and not doing it. And the thing is that me understanding that didn't make the change, but me understanding that drew a light to something where I needed Christ to come, which was to say, I'm a hypocrite. There are things that I would say, don't do that, and I'm doing them myself. And the process of transformation begins not by saying I have no sin, but by acknowledging our sin, acknowledging my sin. But more than the act itself, it's really what was going on to get me there in the first place. See, the interesting thing about the confession that we make when we come to Christ, we have two men making their commitment to Jesus today. The interesting thing is what we're doing is we're acknowledging a need that is within us, that I am a sinner and I, of my own self, have produced death in my life. I need Jesus in me. I can't do it without him. And there is a heart of transformation that takes place when we acknowledge the divinity of God, the authority of God, the way of God. Because really what we're talking about is the authority in our lives, and who do we give it to? Do we take it for ourselves? Do we give it to the evil one? Do we come before God and say, I want you to see? And the thing is, where Christ came to heal the brokenhearted, where Christ came to set free the captive, to release and give liberty, when we seek to have an identity to try to heal our own hearts, to try to transform ourselves through carnality, through our own works, what it ends up doing is leading us on a path that might look like we're heading toward the goodness of God, but really we haven't even begun it yet. All we've done is change some behavior, because what's really driving sin in our lives is what's going on in the heart and in the mind. Who has authority inside? You see, when you submit to God's will will come out. When you put your hope and trust in him, hope and trust in him comes out. It fruits out. And when we see sin, it should be like ding, 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 red flag alert. Something's not right in the heart. So often we were like doctors of this day, they just want to treat symptoms. Sin is a symptom that something is going wrong in the heart. When it gets to sin level, you know, I'm not thinking right. There's something I'm not believing that's right. I'm not thinking in sincerity and truth. Where I really am thinking is in malice and wickedness. And so the question for us as we come to celebrate and look at Jesus today is, what's really going on inside of me? What's driving me? What's motivating me? Is it pride? Is it arrogance? Is it wanting to be seen as something I'm not? Looking for the praises of men more than the praises of God. He says here in verse 5, but all their works they do to be seen by men. We are a society built on this philosophy, right? We want people to see what we're doing. We photograph ourselves and videotape ourselves, and when we score the touchdown, we want everybody to see I scored that touchdown, right? It's part of the DNA in our thinking. It's part of the DNA in who we are. And it's in us all. It says here, they do to be seen by men. They make their phylacteries broad and enlarge the borders of their garments. They love the best places at feasts and the best places at synagogues. They want to be called by men, Rabbi, Rabbi. And he said, but you do not be called Rabbi, for one is your teacher, the Christ, and you are all brethren. Do not call anyone on earth Father, for one is your Father, he who is in heaven. And do not be called teachers, for one is your teacher, the Christ. He says here, dropping down into verse 14, he says, woe to you, you devour widows' houses, and for a pretense, you make long prayers. You basically want people to see what you're doing. I don't want people to think I'm not praying. I don't want people to think I'm not being holy. I don't want people to think that I have nothing to talk to God about. I don't want people to think this. And do you see what the common motivation is and what Jesus is laying out here? Is we do things to want to be seen by others. And he's saying the whole motivation of building a reputation for yourself, so of what other people think, is just malice and wickedness. It's hypocrisy. It's everything that you're doing to try to be something that you're genuinely not. And you want people to see you in a particular way, and you make that the pursuit of your life. Can you think of ways that you see this in your own life? about how you might want people to see this, to see yourself as doing this in the right way or in a good way? See, because when we don't embrace the identity that comes from Christ, we're looking for it in every other way. Jeremiah chapter 9, he says, don't boast about how smart you are, how strong you are, or how wealthy you are. He said, if you want to boast in something, boast that you know the Lord. There, you can boast in that. You want to boast in knowing something? Boast that you know God. And when you know God, you'll realize that in him is all the humility you need to not be boasting so much, but rather, what do you do for God? See, there's a transformation and a change that Jesus says is coming. Notice what he says in verse 11. He says, but he who is greatest among you shall be your servant, and whoever exalts himself will be humbled, and he who humbles himself will be exalted. How do you really partake of the unleavened bread of sincerity and truth? How do you really become what you're supposed to be? How many of you actually were making a concerted effort this week, and no show of hands, but of you who were making a concerted effort this week to not eat leaven? How many of you who said, I set forth, I'm not eating leaven all week, can now look back and say, yeah, I had some? Okay, 2 of us. That's it. Oh, 3. Thank you. Thank you, Tad. It was good to meet you today and for being sharing. So, 2 of us. Okay, so how many had any thoughts of self, malice, wickedness this week? A few more, so 40% of us. The other 60 nailed it. You crushed it, right? Should we go back to the transparency of heart thing? Or where do we need to start in this sermon? So the transparency of heart is to say, yeah, 2 of us, 3 of us might have eaten actual physical leaven, but what about the malice? What is the intention of what's going on here? What is God trying to teach us of what to say, and how do we become? I mentioned it earlier. The way to overcome the flesh is not by trying to fight your flesh. The way to overcome your flesh is to walk in the Spirit. It's interesting that when God gave the commands in Exodus and Leviticus about unleavened bread, he said, get rid of the leaven before the feast. But when you come to the feast, he says, 7 days you shall eat unleavened bread. He's saying this needs to be your focus. And the thing is, where is the attention in our lives, and where is the attention of our heart? Because wherever that attention is where we're going. This is not a great mystery of life, my friends. It's one of the things that it's amazingly simple, but it is so difficult for us because we put our attention on everything else but Jesus. And because we don't have the focus on worshiping Jesus in our life and through him coming to the Father in heaven, we're focused on so many things of the world that draw our attention other places. And now we start living for what adulation, what exaltation, what acknowledgement. Well, I'm the best chess player. Oh, I'm the best football player. I'm the best baseball player. I'm the smartest mathematician. I have more money than you. Look at my car. Look at my life. Look at what I have. And we start building lives upon the recognition of others when the only recognition we need to have is that for God. Humanity wants people to look at us and somehow confirm that we're of value and worth. Now, I want you to think about that because it's on our society all the time. We're looking for someone else to confirm, you did a great job, you're a wonderful person, you do all these things. We're looking for this adulation. But what about the adulation of God? And the adulation of God comes when we seek to do those things that honor him, please him, bring him glory, and ultimately acknowledging I'm the creation here, and he's the creator. The life of a Christian is not about desiring the adulation of others. That is actually what the puffiness, the pride of malice and wickedness of what leaven represents in this feast we celebrate. God is saying, do you want to be great truly? Then you're going to be a servant. Why? Because this is the way I am. No one has given up more for you than God. No one has done more to provide life for you than God. No one has given up more than Jesus Christ for you and me. Who, though he was equal with God, he thought it not something to be held on to grab hold on, to be equal with God, but he made himself of no reputation. He came in the form of a man, and being found as a man, he humbled himself. See, I'm so amazed every time I read Philippians 2 there, because it's like, we never started in the form of God. We never were equal with God. We never made a choice to give up what it was to be God, all the authority, all the power. And again, you can study those verses. That's what he says. He literally gave up the benefits, the authorities, the things that he had as God, to come in the form of man, to be flesh for you and me, and being found as a man, even humbled himself still, not in pride, taking of that power or even trying to claim that power, but rather taking of the power to give it. Every one of us has the hope and the promise of everlasting life if we believe in him, because he had everlasting life to give, and that's exactly what he gave. When he died on the cross, he was saying, I'm giving you the power of endless life. I'm taking what I possess and giving it to you that you might become the righteousness of God. I will be sin for you that you would be righteousness. But you see, the walk is saying, I want you to be righteous. He didn't make us to give us a free card to say, go sin all you want. And there's a big lie that's being told in our society right now and in Christianity in so many places, that Jesus died to give you grace to let you be a sinner freely. It's not true. The glory of God is saying, don't you see, I want you to have what I have. I want you to know love. I want you to know what it is to be a servant and why it's so powerful. I want you to know what it is to have humility of life and relationship, joy, peace, long-suffering, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, meekness, self-control. He's saying, this is the way. This is the way that leads to life for every person. And the fruit of my Spirit in you can overcome this malice and this wickedness to make you pure. But what we have to do is look to Christ and receive that power, because it's not coming from ourselves. And it's not coming by believing in the world. And it's not coming by looking for the recognition of other people in our lives. Every time you find yourself wanting the acknowledgement of others, you just have to look and say, who am I pursuing right now? And what am I pursuing? Am I taking my identity in what someone else other than God says about me and what they think of me, as opposed to what God thinks of me? Now, what's beautiful is when God thinks well of you and other people think well of you. But if you get the pursuit wrong, you'll be looking for adulation and the worship of self rather than of God. And now you know what the Pharisees really wanted. They wanted to be adored by others. They wanted to be seen well by others. And what it did was it distorted their whole view of God's word and God's way, so that in doing so, they actually went against what he wanted. He said, you tithe on mint, anise, cumin. He said, you go and tithe on your herbs. But you neglect the weightier matters of the law, justice, mercy, and faith. Sometimes we can do this in life. I had a man come to our church years ago, and he was so desirous to keep the Sabbath. And he said, I forsake all business. We don't try to do any business on the Sabbath or exchange any money. So he comes to church, and we know him, and he stays there in fellowship, and pretty much everybody leaves. And as they're leaving to drive home, which was an hour away, he realizes, I never got gas. So our services there ended like at about 12:30. It might have been middle of the afternoon. This was a summer day, so there was still lots of light left. So he doesn't have gas to get home where food is, but in the car is no food and no drink for his wife and his little child. And what he ended up doing was making the decision that they would sit and wait for the Sabbath to end before he would either buy the gas or go into the grocery store that's right there to get food for his little child and the wife. And he asked me about it the next week, and I said, I think you've missed the whole point here, my friend. you missed the whole point of the law. The law was not meant to be something that would bring harm and punishment to another. Even Jesus said, if any of you had an ox that went into the ditch, wouldn't you pull it out? Jesus, when he walked around the earth, everybody was questioning, why is he healing people? Because he's the healer. That's who he is in here. And the thing we have to understand is we study God's word and we study the law and we study the prophets and we study the writings. What's here? See, this is what God says better about the new covenant. He says, I'm writing a law in your heart and in your mind. Why? Because if I write it there and it's being expressed in your heart and in your mind, now it can come out in the right way. And you will understand why you can read in the scripture about Rahab bearing false witness about where the spies were that came in to the land of town of Jericho, the city of Jericho. And it's accounted as faith. She's listed in the faith chapter for doing what? Lying. She bore false witness. Why? Because the higher law was love, and what she had, as it was recorded in Scripture, was a faith in God that caused her to act on behalf of his people to make a statement that gave life to them. And what did she do by that lie? She ended up saving herself and her whole household. They were all pulled out alive when Israel went. The heart of the law was to do good and to give life. When Jesus was working on the Sabbath, it was because his heart was keeping the law to heal, to bring reconciliation. It didn't mean then that he was teaching anybody to go out and break the Sabbath, but what was he doing on the Sabbath? He was willing to sacrifice of himself in order to do good to someone else. You ever notice when you go into the law that there's a rewrite on the Fourth Commandment, right? In Exodus, it's 6 days you shall work and do all your labor. The seventh day you shall rest, right? Because in it, God made the whole earth and heavens in 6 days, but the seventh he rested. But you go to Deuteronomy, and he says, I did it to pull you out of Egypt when I pulled you out of bondage. And you remember, this was the first thing he gave his people to see if they would obey him. But you know what it says in both those places? It says, and you shall give rest, right? To your sons, your daughters, your manservants, your maidservants. What was Jesus doing every time he touched a person who was blind, touched a person who was lame, touched a person who needed healing? He was giving them rest. He was setting them free. He was totally fulfilling the heart of the commandment. And while they were looking at his action of what he was doing, saying he's working, in the reality, he was totally keeping it because he was focused on his service to give rest, to give healing, to give life to somebody else. I encourage you, young families, help your children engage in this thinking. The Sabbath is not just a day of thou shalt not and you shall do nothing. There's no commandment about it being idleness. In fact, everything we learn when we look at and worship Jesus, it's a day to be thinking about how can I be of service to somebody else. And yeah, take your rest, take your time. Your family might need it. You guys minister to each other. Do things that bring edification in life, but it's not just a day of don't do it, don't do this, don't do that. It is a day of engagement with God and with each other and of service. It is about sharing the life of God, the mercies of God, the grace of God with one another. And the Pharisees completely missed it because they were so focused on the outward actions and judging the actions of others, they totally missed what was going on in the heart. And that's the point. Are we seeing what's going on in the heart? Because the heart of Jesus is what should be guiding us. He was a physical, earthly, walking, talking, animated earth representation of the law. That's why the Gospels are so beautiful. Do you want to know what the law looks like in action? Read the life of Jesus. The life of Jesus. Now turn with me over to John chapter 5. Because I want to go through some of these. In Luke chapter 5 and verse 19, notice with me in Luke chapter 5 and verse 19. Jesus says in I said Luke 5, didn't I? I'm so sorry. John 5. I did say John? I was trying to trick you to see if you could see the impurity of my heart and know. So bad magic trick. Stay in John. John chapter 5. I went to Luke. John chapter 5, verse 19. Jesus says here, most assuredly I say to you, the Son can do nothing of himself. But what he sees the Father doing, whatever he does, the Son does in like manner. Do you believe that Jesus was telling the truth here? Do you believe that Jesus, as he's walking on this earth, he really meant it when he said he could do nothing of himself? If Jesus says that of him, what should we be thinking? I put it forth because much of my life has been spent thinking I could do something, that I didn't necessarily need God. Now, I don't think Jesus was saying we need God to figure out what kind of cereal we want. I mean, we should all be choosing Rice Krispies with ice cream every morning. That is what you should be eating, right? We don't need to be saying that I can't make myself a bowl of cereal or make a decision about the cereal in the morning. It's saying, I can't do anything without you, God. And I only know what to be doing as if I'm seeing you doing it. Isn't that underlying assumption that if we would acknowledge that we can do nothing, that our Father in heaven would then show us the something so we would know what we're doing? So one of the big misses in life when it comes to our hearts is we can get so attached to what we want to do that we fail to take the time to seek, God, what do you want me to be doing? But Jesus is saying, I can do nothing. I can do nothing of myself. Notice what he says here, dropping down to verse 30. He says, I can of myself do nothing. As I hear, I judge, and my judgment is righteous, because I do not seek my own will, but the will of the Father who sent me. Jesus is saying, I can't do anything, but what I do that's good, it's because I'm seeking the will of my Father. The question we have to ask ourselves is, if this is Jesus' truth, is it my truth? Am I seeking the will of my Father? Is this the purpose of my life? To acknowledge I can't do anything except what he shows me. I can't do my own will but his. See, now we're getting to where the rubber really meets the road and what a disciple's really being about. Because Jesus said, unless you forsake all and follow me, you are not worthy to be my disciple. And the all he was talking about is what's going on inside. To think that we have something of ourselves, that we're going to make something of ourselves apart from the identity that he created us for. Now see, God gave different personalities. God gave different gifts. God gave different talents. But the one thing that we are to share in common that produces the fellowship for all eternity in God's kingdom forever is this love that he puts among us and between us. And that love, that joy, that peace, that long-suffering, all that goodness of the character of God, that's what we all share in common. But the talents that Johnny has are different than my talents, and that's good. You don't want Eric's talents and Justin's talents and Lonnie's talents, everybody's talents to be the same talents. It's actually the beautiful mix of talents that make it all work and make it all beautiful. And that's what God did. He made us unique to be individuals, but yet united in a spirit of faith, love, and hope with one another that doesn't end. And so if we all take of what we have and share it like Jesus did, now you're producing the things in life. And everybody has the opportunity to do this with our lives. But it doesn't start by trying to fix outward behaviors. It starts like what Jesus told the Pharisees back in Matthew 23. We didn't read it, but he said, you cleanse the outside of the cup, but the fact is the inside's still dirty. He said, clean the inside of the cup. The outside will be clean also. Have you ever tried to do that with a cup? It doesn't work so well in the physical, but obviously it works in the spiritual. Because if you take a cup that's dirty on the outside and the inside, and you only clean the inside, the outside's still dirty. But here's what's amazing about the way God works with you as a vessel and a cup. When God puts his spirit in, what starts to overflow in your life, as he cleans up what's inside, it flows out on the outside. It can't help but make the outside clean too. You know that the way to change your behavior is to change the inside. And humanly, we keep trying to think that I got to get rid of the physical leaven and I got to get rid of these physical behaviors. It's an approach that is short-term at best. Because the leaven's coming back in your home. I know somebody's having pizza tonight. And you know that when it comes to the leaven of malice and wickedness, it's all there. There's a default way inside of you. And if you don't overcome it by the Spirit of God, you're going right back. I know that if I can live a day under the Lord today, and if I wake up tomorrow and I don't do it all over and give myself to die daily with the Lord, I know I'm going right back into the sin of malice and wickedness, self-seeking, self-pleasuring, trying to find all the ways that I live life for me and wanting adulation from others. I want people to like me, say nice things to me. They should be kind to me. I was kind to them. No, you've got to dismiss all that and say, none of that's even relevant. It doesn't matter what people think of you. It doesn't matter how they would judge you. The point is, how do I serve them? Jesus was saying, how do I serve them? My heart is to serve. So he could say things to people who were mocking him, beating him, crucifying him, say things like, Father, forgive them. They know not what they do, and mean it. Because he was there for them. And what we do in our human lives is we try to have it our way. This is where our pride comes up. We don't want people pushing us around. We don't want people telling us what to do. We have all this angst to want to fight. But the fight is not with flesh. The fight is in the Spirit. Be strong in the Lord and in the power of his might. Take heed that you would stand, being armed. God is looking for you and me to be pure like Jesus is. Turn with me to John 6:38. Oh, excuse me. Let's go to chapter 5 here before we go to John 6. Just stay in 5. Notice in verse 41, he says, I do not receive honor from men. But I know you that you do not have the love of God in you. I have come in my Father's name, and you do not receive me. If another comes in his own name, you receive him. How can you believe who receive honor from one another and do not seek the honor that comes from the only God? Did you hear that? He says, you want to be a believer? How can you even be a believer if you're not seeking the honor of God? How does that work? Because if you really believe, then you would be seeking to honor him. And you wouldn't be seeking honor from men because you're not looking for adulation for yourself. You're looking for it for God. Would you say that's a pretty pure way to think and live? Would you say that's pretty stripped away of the self? Because this is what Jesus is representing to us in this feast and in this teaching. Notice in John 6:38 now, let's go over there. He says, for I have come down from heaven not to do my own will, but the will of him who sent me. When you wake up in the morning, do you say, well, I didn't come down from heaven, but I did rise up from this bed today. I've come to do not my own will, but the will of the Father who gives me life today. See, that's what we have. When Jesus gave the gift, he gave what he had. What do you have? You've got your life today. How are you a dad, a husband? How are you a mom? A wife? How are you working in society, being a friend? Are you seeking the will of God in what you do? Notice with me now in John 8:28. In John 8:28, it says this, Jesus said to them, when you lift up the Son of Man, then you will know that I am he and that I do nothing of myself, but as the Father taught me, I speak these things. He's saying, I didn't even say what I wanted to say. It was my Father who was teaching me what to speak, and that's what I wanted to share with you. And he who sent me is with me. The Father has not left me alone, for I always do the things that please him. There's a wholehearted purpose and worship in life to say, I just want to do what you want me to do. What would life look like if this is what we did? If we made our lives to pursue after him. Notice in verse 50, he says, I do not seek my own glory, there is one who seeks and judges. Now think about that. Jesus laid down the glory. He laid down who he was to come to earth, and he's saying, I'm not even seeking that now. My whole point is to seek your glory, Father. And in seeking the glory of the Father, he's saying, I'm just going to trust that you're going to work this out. Sometimes we say in our minds, well, Jesus knew what was going to happen, right? Was it really that big a deal? I mean, he did know that the plan was that he was going to die for sins, but he would be resurrected. So maybe it's somehow, he obviously knew. He had all this knowledge ahead of time of where his life was going. And so maybe somehow, it's not as genuine of a life like we have to go through because we don't know what's going to happen. Or do we? What were you offered when you believed in Jesus Christ? Were you not offered everlasting life? Were you not offered that if you would endure to the end, you would be saved? Were you not offered that according to your works, you would be rewarded? Were you not offered that you would have a place in his kingdom? Were you not offered that it was going to turn out well? You see, sometimes in our own lives, we lose track of what's really going on. We get so caught up in the day-to-day. We're looking at that card floating, and we're not seeing the string, and we're not really seeing what's going on. And the reality of life is, you and I are here for a purpose, to be made in the image of God, till we all come, as it says in Ephesians 4, to the measure of the stature of the fullness of Christ. There is no other aim. There is no other purpose. And when we see the life of Jesus, it's demonstrating to us, this is how you live. This is not the way of the world. If you're trying to be a part of the world and a part of the way of God, it's a mix. It's like saying, I'm unleavened and de-leavened. No, you either have leaven or not. There is no such thing as a mix of bread. Once the leaven's in, it's leavened bread. If it's not in, it's unleavened. In our lives, it's the same thing. What God is doing through the purifying process is taking us to a place of holiness. And in our hearts and minds, we have to be in faith saying, that's what I want. Can you say today, I do believe that God can do this work in my life. I can live according to his will and his ways, and I can be engaged for his glory and purpose. I can learn to love like he loves. And the thing is that people keep looking for love from everybody else, but you know what Jesus said in the prayer before he died, before he was taken? He said, I've shown them, Father, that you love them, my disciples. And he said, and I'm not just praying for those that are here. He said, I'm praying for all who would believe, which is every one of you who believes in this room. He says, I'm showing them that you love them with the love with which you loved me. Do you want to find a place of warmness in your life, of approval? How about the eternal God saying, I love you just like I love Jesus? That's why he sent his son for you. That's why he redeemed you. Why would we then treasure the words and the adoration of a human being over that of the Creator God who's saying, don't you see? I chose you. I appointed you. I love you. He's totally on your side from the very beginning of the creation of you and the life he gave you. He has always been involved. He says that he predestined you to be conformed to the image of his son. So any other game we play is got to take a way, way, way backseat to that. Because what are we doing? We're living out a life for Christ. Why? Because God wants us to be in his kingdom forever. He wants us to share fellowship and eternal life. And this feast of unleavened bread is a reminder that we must be about our Father's business and putting our heart and attention onto Jesus Christ, to worship him, to love him, to obey him. Turn with me over to verse 54. He says, if I honor myself, my honor is nothing. You ever do that in life? You find that you want to make sure people know that you did that so you get the credit? I can confess that. I'll just be transparent. I have done that many times in my life. I just want to make sure that you know that I was the one who did that. Oh, great, for honoring yourself, David. It's meaningless. Because I wanted somebody to think better of what I did. I wanted credit for something that I did. I wasn't really thinking as a servant anymore. I was thinking of, how can I be served? How can I get somebody to adore what I did? And now I see that in myself, and I know, oh man, that law of sin is in me. That is vile. I must fight that. I must resist that. It's a lie. Because the only adoration I need is when my Father says, well done, good and faithful servant. You are my son in whom I'm well pleased. That's it. There is one goal. And when we do that, our lives actually get a maturity where we find an identity we didn't even know we had, because we accept the identity in Jesus and we become who he wants us to be, and we start living different because what's in our heart is different, and now we have a heart that's based on where he wants us to be. It's not about for self, it's about for his glory. Notice what he says in John 7:16-18. He says here, my doctrine is not mine, but his who sent me. If anyone wills to do his will, he shall know concerning the doctrine, whether it is from God or whether I speak on my own authority. He who speaks from himself seeks his own glory. He who seeks the glory of the one who sent him is true, and no unrighteousness is in him. So just like that verse we looked at a little earlier, look at what it says. Because so he mentioned, like, how can you even believe if you're seeking for yourself? Jesus is saying, how can you even be true if what you're really speaking and what you're really seeking is just for yourself? How can you say you're true? Because what the truth is that there is one God, and he is over all, and there is no unrighteousness in him. So for us to be of his, must be. Matthew 20:28 says that Jesus, he said he did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many. And he also says that in Luke 22, when he took of the cup and he took of the bread, he gave thanks when he offered himself for you and me. Could somebody click to the slide that we have here? Just go ahead and click on that. And why don't we go ahead and just click down through all the points, if you would, for me at this point. So we pretty much read all these just now. What kind of transformation would this be in us if this is the way we lived? If you want to think about what it is to change life, this is where it is. If you're saying, you know, I have a problem that I'm not very giving, I'm not very kind, I'm not very loving. If you say, I'm not sure that I'm doing everything I should be in my life, I'm wondering whether I'm really obeying God. Do you see what this life is here? This life is the motivation for everything else that you might want to do. It will fruit out all the good things of life because the pursuit is not about self. The pursuit is about coming to God. And if Jesus, who was with God and was God, comes to the earth to live this way and acknowledge these truths, how much more should this be the way that we live our lives daily in saying, I can do nothing apart from you, God. I need you today. I can't speak things, God, of my own. I need you today. I am not here to honor me or receive honor from them. I'm here to receive for you, God, honor for you. I'm here to bless you. I'm here to seek your glory, not mine. Yours, God. Just everything in my life, let it be poured out for you, to serve you, to honor you, to bless you. I don't need to be served. I just need to serve. I want to be a servant for you, and to be thankful to do it. You see, when Jesus says the hard things like, bless those who curse you, and we say, oh, that's so hard. It is in the flesh. This is what empowers that. When Jesus says, love your enemies, we say, oh, it's so hard to do. Yes, it is. But this is the power in it. The power in it comes from thinking of life completely differently. You're not going to base your actions on what somebody did to you. Can you imagine if God was constantly reacting to human beings? What a mess. He doesn't react. He's God all the time. He sends his rain on the just and the unjust. He says, be merciful as I am merciful. Be perfect as I am perfect. And he says things to us like, hey, when people despise you, make fun of you, speak evil of you, rejoice in it. How can you even be thinking that way? Because you're empowered by this. This is what's really unleavened. This is what is really sincere and true. And the thing that I want to leave you with today is every moment that we have in our lives, and we wake up each day and we start to contemplate, what am I doing today? What is my life? This is where you can be surrendering yourself and say, I really don't want what you do, something of my own, what you don't have for me today. Ask God to set your day for you. Ask God to show you where you need to be focusing your energies and your efforts. God already knows that you parents have kids. He already knows you may have a spouse. He already knows what work responsibilities you have. He will help you through it. But giving the trust up to say, you're going to be the one that's going to empower my life, and I don't want to live life on this earth unless I've done this, because if we miss this, what do we have? Jesus said, what does it profit a man if he gains the whole world and yet loses his own soul? The Feast of Unleavened Bread is a recognition that God gave you your life back. And in having your life back, now you can give the life that he gave to you right back to him in honoring him and saying, this life I now have, I give back to you. I am crucified with Christ, nevertheless I live, yet not I, but Christ lives in me. And the life that I now live in the flesh, I live by the faith of the Son of God who loved me and gave himself for me. That is what is pure. That is what is true. And may our hearts be coming to that more and more. Friends, if you have any conviction of heart and mind and sin today, I would ask that you would come forward after the worship, actually after the baptism, because I don't know your time schedule back there. But don't leave this place today without seeking the prayer of somebody that you trust, that you love, that you would like to pray for you. Because one of the most beautiful things we can do is just say, I just need help. Would you just pray with me for help? And it doesn't need to be much more than that. But acknowledging that we all have a need for God. We can't live without his blessings, without his love. Let's pursue him and seek him. Thank you for having us here today. It's been a real blessing to be here with you all.